Hello, everyone. I'm James Kelly with OETC, and welcome to Moving to Modern Management with Microsoft's Intune, presented by Jeff Hinkle, Technology Services Manager at Puyallup School District. After the talk, we'll host a brief Q&A, so feel free to put any questions into the chat or using the Q&A feature on the right-hand side. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Jeff.
All right. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I know it's 4 o'clock, and as you all are, we're probably all missing the ACPE in-person parties and fun times that we have, but this is the next best thing because you get to spend it with me. So my name is Jeff Hinkle, and I am the Technology Services Director or Manager at the Puyallup School District. I'm here to just share with you kind of our district's experience in moving to Intune. Although the presentation is going to be around how we moved and it will have some technical information, it's not just going to be a technical deep dive. However, if you have questions regarding any technical things, please put them in the chat or the Q&A because I would be able to answer them and help you in any way I can and give you what you're hoping for. So don't be afraid to post those things in there. With that, I'm going to share my screen with my presentation and we will begin here. All right, so again, this is kind of our journey in the Puyallup School District of moving to Microsoft's Intune. So I want to share a little bit of the backstory first of kind of where we arrived and why we made the move before we kind of go from there. So just a little bit about us as a school district. So we're mostly a suburban district. We're also the 8th largest in Washington State. We have about 4,000 staff, 23,000 students. We don't have a tech levy, so our current one-to-one program is funded completely out of our general ed dollars. We don't have any kind of additional funds for that, nor have we done that with our voters. So that's kind of where we're at least as far as our funding for our devices and everything goes. So everything's out of the general fund. We have 34 schools and 6 support sites. So we have 3 comprehensive high schools, 1 alternative high school, 7 junior highs, and 20, I think we're at 22 elementaries now. And then we also have an alternative learning place called Puyallup Digital Learning. So it's a combination of a bunch of different programs, but that's kind of our setup in here in the Puyallup School District. So I wanted to share with you a little video of kind of what was our life like in 2015. So I hope you can hear audio. I did check the box, so I'm hoping it all goes through right. Yeah, don't forget the extra little kick in there at the end, right? He was, not only did he knock it over, but then he had to kick it at the end. So that's kind of the perspective that both our IT staff and our staff and students in the district felt around kind of technology. We are a Microsoft district, as you know. So we used SCCM for our management, and we had a joke around here. I didn't put it up on the screen, but I'll share it with you. So it's a quote from Anchorman that said, 60% of the time, SCCM works every time. That's kind of how we thought about it. And so it was not working. There was a bunch of issues. Devices weren't getting updates or software or anything like that. So we knew that we needed to do something about that. We also had no backups really in place. I mean, we did have some, but it wasn't very well, and we'd never tested them really. So it's just kind of a bad environment all around. We obviously, like probably many of you, we didn't have any kind of dedicated security IT personnel. So it's just kind of everybody was responsible for it on their own, or you just kind of did it as you needed to. And then multiple single points of failure, probably just like from our network to our devices to our Microsoft technologies and Active Directory and stuff like that. So that was kind of the way that we were at that point. We also had no training, so we didn't have any TOSAs when I came on board. I'd heard that there had been, many times previously, but not at least when I started 7 years ago. So there's no training, no systems, no any kind of thing around technology. And if you're like a technician, like I have been, you kind of were the trainer. So teachers might ask you like, hey, how do I use the doc cam? And you're like, well, flip this button, point the camera, here's how you focus, here's how you do that. And they're like, well, no, how do I use it with teaching? And you're like, well, I don't know. That's not my world. So that was kind of what part of this is, if where we were at. And unfortunately, staff were local administrators on their computers. So they were able to install any kind of software they wanted, download anything from the internet, and use it. And then, of course, they also could use any web application they wanted. So there was no system as far as like application governance or approval. It was just, hey, I'm going to upload student data into whatever looks good at the time. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. So that's kind of where we were 5 years ago. And I wanted to share that with you because now we get to start kind of where we ended up and what was it that was leading us to this point. So one of our directors, he was given a vision about, he wanted to do a one-to-one program in open education resources and digital curriculum. And so his vision that he had kind of said, and kind of our why here at the Puyallup School District in our IT department is, I kind of changed this. He says it's all about the learning. I changed it to IT's all about the learning. And that was kind of the beginning lens of our why, of what we started looking at everything through. So then it became about, how is the user experience? How is this going to impact learning? How is this going to impact business? How is this going to impact the whole educational organization as a whole? But that really gave us our beginning lens to then start seeing everything through. And that was very important for us, if not probably the most important thing that began the journey. So we began moving, and we began moving to a one-to-one expansion. So we went from 3,000 devices to then every student having a device, so 23,000. We began moving into digital learning materials. So this was a combination of OER as well as digital curriculum. So all the different various web apps that I'm sure you guys use in your districts, but that's what began that. We also began a learning management system. So Schoology is the one that we ultimately ended up on, but that's what we did there. And then we started also digitizing our records. We used to have a warehouse completely filled with boxes of paper. And we went through a process a few years ago of actually getting rid of that and putting it into a digital record. So, so that was very nice. We also understand that we needed to meet the needs of the classroom when it came to this new technology. So it wasn't just about like throwing a device, right? Because you can do that all day long, but it was actually about making an impact to the classroom and to the learning that was happening. And then we also wanted to began moving to being a collaborative partner and innovator in learning and business in our district. So the current reality, this is kind of an improvement matrix that we came up with. We were on the bottom left, unfortunately. So things were super complex. The high cost per user was pretty much really bad. I mean, we were spending on software that nobody used. We were spending on web applications where, some people were using it, but not the volume that we were purchasing, right? So we had no data on anything. It was just kind of the Wild West as far as all of that goes. We didn't have any systems. So, like one I talked about was the training. We didn't have any way of like a ticket system that was working well to where people could tell us their problems. We didn't have any application governance. We didn't work with various departments to try to work together collaboratively to figure these things out. So that was a lot of where we were was, okay, our users aren't getting what they need. Things are broken or it doesn't work all the time. We're constantly getting, calls or tickets about this stuff. And we have no system in place that's working that is actually moving us forward. So that's kind of where we were at in our current reality, is that bottom left corner. So what we needed to, and this was before COVID, so this is kind of where we were thinking through before the pandemic hit. So we wanted to prepare for anywhere, anytime learning and connectivity. We wanted to redefine, well, what is user and device management, right? Because it's not just, a device in front of them, it's also how they interact with it. We also needed to lower our management costs, our preparation work, and all the repairs that we get back from these things. We also needed it to be simple. And one of the things that we, and I'll share more about this later on, but one of the things that we needed was for something to just work. And that was one of the experiences that we wanted our users to have, is that it just works. They don't have to think about it, it just works. And of course, especially in today's environment, we needed it to be secure. So we needed it to not just be a Wild West open and kind of do whatever we want. We need something that was going to help us improve our security posture. So those were kind of the things that we wanted to move forward into as we were looking at, do we continue with SCCM? Is that kind of the road that we want to walk down? Or do we want to look at something different? So now we were kind of presented with a choice. SCCM wasn't working. We had no systems in place. The user experience was terrible. And we needed to go, okay, now we have a choice. We can either try to do something that was going to, we weren't sure was going to work or get better, or we could try to look at something, be open to something better to the future of what is happening out there now. So with that, I have another video. So bear with me. This is the only two. So this is the second one.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are two people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's not enough left to do, is it?
So that's kind of where we were, is we needed to figure out, did we need to stay on the elevator hoping somebody was going to show up, or did we literally just need to walk? And I think that's was kind of the choice that we ultimately came to, is, I mean, we could stay where we were and, like he mentioned there at the end, well, there's nothing left to do but cry, or we could actually take the steps necessary to get off the escalator and move forward. So this is something I'll give you guys some time to read here, but it's kind of the dead horse theory. And so the whole gist of it is basically, if you're riding a dead horse, the best strategy is to dismount, to get off. And so I'll give you a few seconds here to read some of what they do in here, and you can see how you can turn this into your own kind of terminology in your district. Right, so for us, it was with SCCM, we were kind of feeling like, well, maybe we just need to, change it up, throw somebody else at it, or maybe we needed to threaten, people like, hey, if you don't get this right, you're gonna be fired, right? None of that works. Appoint committees, lower the standard. Well, SCCM, 60% of the time it works every time, right? So maybe that's okay. It's not that bad, is it? Hire outside contractors, look for additional funding to try to increase the speed of the dead horse. I mean, so many things, right? Or promote other people. By the way, that promotion was me, in case you didn't get that. The last one there, number 14. So I got moved into a supervisory position, right? Just kidding. But yeah, how many of us are trying to just beat a dead horse? Are you just looking at a system that you're just trying to make work in some way, or are you looking to actually get off? Is it time to get off and to move on to something else that does work? And that's ultimately what what we decided on is we wanted to move because we were tired of the dead horse. So we chose Microsoft Intune, which is, again, what this presentation is about. One of the things, or some things that we loved about it, and I'll talk more in depth about these things, but is that it's always connected. So as long as the device has an internet connection, it can talk back to Intune and it can get any changes that you throw at it. That was one big key thing that we liked, and especially helped us in this COVID world that we live in right now. Central management of all software and policy. So it helped us gather everything together and also kind of have a fresh look at what we needed to do as far as, safeguarding, locking down, installing, uninstalling, all of that stuff. Updates, like I said, updates was a big issue. We had trouble with Windows updates every month, trying to get it out to all of our devices, and it wasn't working. So we were very, very, very behind. And Intune helped us in this case to look at it differently and try to get moved forward. And then also was just a better layer of defense. And ultimately, all of these things, when we started looking at Intune, we thought it was just going to be about Intune, right? So it's, okay, well, it's just going to change from SCCM to Intune. But actually, it became more than that. So before I get into that, our first attempt at Intune, we failed. We actually tried Intune a few years ago, and before we had the success that we have today, we failed. So we decided to try the co-management route, and co-management now is much better. Back when we tried it, it was not. So I want to make sure that I put in that disclaimer first. But we failed. So we were having issues. SCCM and Intune weren't connecting. Our AD on-prem and Azure wasn't working right. And we basically got to the point of where we had to say, okay, are we going to re-image every device that we're trying to get working? Or are we going to try to move into Intune? And our director finally had to pull the plug and say, look, we're going to have to re-image all of our devices because it's not working. That was about $100,000 decision that he had to make for us, because we had to double and triple the labor in order to get all of those devices that we were trying re-imaged and re-prepped. Plus our time was a lot shorter now because we waited until that time to pull the plug. So that was a $100,000 hit against our budget when we made that decision and when our first implementation of Intune did not work. With that, though, we kind of had two options. We could look at it and go, you know what, not worth it. We're just going to go back to the way things were. So, we saw the difficulty and the opportunity and went, you know what, we're just not going to do that. Or we saw the opportunity and we're going, you know what, maybe we can do something with this. Maybe we can try again. And so what we did was our director met with some bigwigs up in Microsoft and had a meeting with them. And basically what he said is, look, we want to partner with you guys and make this work, but you guys make it very difficult to do that. We want to be a collaborative partner with you, Microsoft, to try to do something, but it's hard. You make it difficult. We want to. So through that conversation started our reboot. And our reboot is that we started wanting to look at Intune differently. So instead of trying to do co-management, instead of trying to turn Intune what SCCM was, we decided to say, you know what, let's just stop looking at it and trying to make it something that's not, and let's move forward and make it something that what it's designed to be. So what we did is we started from scratch. I remember when we had our first sit down with our Microsoft person who was helping us begin again, and I said to them, I said, okay, I pull a device out of the box, I set it up on my imaging bench. What do I do? How do I get it into Intune? That's step number one. I need to know that. And that was the beginning of how we started figuring out little by little each piece that we wanted to make in order to make that possible. The other thing that we did is we started saying, you know what, that end user experience is the most important thing that we need to be thinking about. So any kind of software, any kind of configuration changes, that's the lens that we need to be thinking through, is how is this going to impact the user experience? Is it going to make it better? Is it going to make it to where they don't have to do anything or they have to do very minimal? Is it going to provide flexibility? in their schedules. So an example of that would be like Windows updates. We do Windows updates on a cycle, but what we do is we have it prompt the end user to say, hey, you have X many days before you get a reboot, and you get to pick your time if you want. So if you want to restart tonight, if you want to pick a specific time, because you know that, say you leave your device on your your desk, but you can say, hey, you know what, I'm usually leave at 3:30 or 4. Go ahead and reboot at 5. I'm good with that. So we give them the ability to customize their own experience. And then, of course, we want it to just be simple. We need it to just work. So that was kind of what started and helped us look through a different lens when it came to our reboot. So our second attempt at moving forward with Microsoft Intune. One advice I'd give to you guys, and this was kind of the lens. So when I did Intune and when we worked on it, it was about 9 months that we spent in depth transitioning and working hard. So it was from October all the way until kind of the next summer when we started provisioning every device into our Intune environment. Now, that's not to say that that's how long we waited before we started putting devices up there. We had already started our test and pilots way before then. So October is when we started. By January, we were deploying out our first student devices that were Intune and Azure AD managed. And then from there, it just only grew. So then we started going out to more and more students in more and more of our schools. And then we started moving it out to more and more of our staff. So don't be afraid to start somewhere. And what I'd say is you're not going to have it all figured out. So my director's desk, he was one of our first, he was the first person to get an Intune device as his sole machine. So he gave up his old machine, his old laptop, and said, okay, give me an Intune device. I'm going to use it every day, and I'm going to help you guys when it comes to certain issues that arise. So that way you can hear it straight from somebody. That was very important. So you directors, if you're watching this right now, you guys need to be the first people. If you haven't started this journey, you guys need to be the first people to get a device, because as you're using it, you're going to see firsthand the experience, and you're going to be able to help guide the rest of your IT staff in the direction, as well as, right, be the first person that tells upper management, hey, we're moving in this direction. I'm already using it, right? So you need to be that first person. So if you're in the audience, please, 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 look at your IT staff, whoever's in charge of your device management, and say, give me a device, let me be your first user. And there were times where our director, he had to have both, right? That's okay, but use it as your primary workstation. Then when something's not working, set it aside, use your other one while your team fixes it, and then go back to it and try again. The other thing, so my director's office was probably about 10, 15 feet away from me. And whenever he would have a problem, he would lean back and look at me and yell out of his door and say, Jeff, hey, how do I print? And I'd look at him and I go, wait, oh, I don't know. And then we had to solve the problem of, well, how are our users going to print now? Right? And there's many solutions out there that you can choose from for printing. Another thing that came up was as we started moving it out into our schools, teachers were like, well, I have all of these pretty, wonderful, beautiful fonts that I want to use on all of my wonderful Word docs and PowerPoints and the mess of fonts, right? For us, we do fonts as another swear word. So, but that is essentially a problem that we had to solve, was people are like, I need my fonts. So then we had to go back and say, well, gosh, how do we install fonts then at this level? Another thing was remote support, right? Software installation, on-prem access. So we still use certain applications that require you to access a file server on-prem. So we had to figure out, well, in an Azure AD cloud managed device, how do you still get access on-prem? So we had to figure out a solution for that. Another thing was single sign-on and identity. How do we get it so that way everything's tied to that single user point and they get access to all they need, both in the cloud and on-prem? So those were some of the things that as we journeyed down this road, we had to figure out. We didn't have it all figured out, but we were not afraid to start. We were not afraid to get our feet wet and to try. So that's what I would say to you guys. If you're in the journey, or if you're just about to begin the journey, you're thinking about it, just start and you'll figure it out as you go. You're not going to have all the answers, and that's okay. And then remember when I alluded earlier, I said it was going to be, we thought it was just going to be a move to Intune, and that was it. What we didn't realize is that it started a transformation. It started a technology transformation that we didn't plan for. We didn't even think about until we started this journey. And the transformation hit many different areas. One of them was our infrastructure. We knew obviously we were going one-to-one, but then as we moved to more digital, as we moved to more cloud-based, right? We knew that we needed an infrastructure that could handle that much more pressure, not only on our local networks, obviously across our different sites and schools, but then also our internet, right? Because all of our technology now is reaching out and coming back in via our internet pipe. So we needed to make sure not only A, our pipe is big enough to handle that, but B, that we had redundancy in case our main pipe goes down, learning can still continue, right? So then it went back to that end user experience, and it came back to that IT is all about the learning. So we had to think through that lens and go, well, if our main internet pipe goes down, we need to make sure that we have a secondary. So then we started doing work on our infrastructure in that method. We had to look at a bunch of our legacy systems. And yes, I'm going to say that on-prem is, in my mind, it's a legacy system that's slowly being moved away. So more and more of what Microsoft is doing, right, is turning on and enabling cloud technologies, right? You see that all the time with the Power Apps platform now that's happening. You see that with obviously Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive and Azure. And Microsoft is only putting so much more emphasis on those things. So if you're not already thinking about those things, you need to begin thinking about that because that's where they're moving. That's where this industry is moving as far as these things go. Doesn't mean that Azure or Active Directory on-prem isn't going away, at least not yet anyways, and I don't know when that'll be, but you have to be thinking about that, is everything's being moved into the cloud in some way, shape, or form. So how are you going to leverage that, right? Why are you waiting instead of moving? So we had to think about, well, okay, all of our users, going back to this kind of on-prem to cloud thinking, all of our users access their stuff via file server on our servers here, right? But we were going, well, shoot, we've been paying Microsoft for years, and we're not using OneDrive or SharePoint, but yet we're paying them for it. Why are we eating up our file server when we could just move them to their own OneDrive and then they get all these additional capabilities? So what we did before we deployed even our first Intune device was we started moving people over to OneDrive. So copying their file server drive, their personal one, over to OneDrive. And then we started rolling out Intune devices. And the reason why that was so important was because when they received their Intune device, it was a seamless experience transferring from one to the other. And now that makes it to where even like a hot swap is not detrimental to a staff member or a student, because all they do is they log in, and usually within like about 5 minutes, all of their OneDrive content is synced over. All of their settings now are synced over, so their background, light or dark mode, even past Wi-Fi's they've connected to, so their home Wi-Fi or whatever, all of that syncs across now. So when they get a new device or a hot swap, it literally, the experience is so seamless. So they don't even feel it anymore. So those are some of the things that we transitioned and started moving to. Other things we had to think about was identity. So single sign-on. A lot of our systems were not set up that way. Some of them had it, some of them did not. So we had to be thinking about, well, shoot, if we're in this cloud Azure AD world, we need to have the ability for them to seamlessly log into all of these various applications. So Azure AD became our source of identity. And that's where we pointed everything back to. So we use Clever in our district. So Clever points to Azure AD for SSO. A lot of our other apps are now SSO'd either through Clever or through Azure AD directly. And all of that makes us that way when they click on any web application, they immediately get logged in and they're able to function. And it's a seamless, better user experience for our users. Again, integration. So we started creating like an application governance team that now reviews processes for any application that the district wants to bring in. And that could be software that downloads onto the computer, or that could be a web application that is hosted on, somebody's software as a service thing. So we looked at all of that and we put it all together. but not only integration as far as like how do people log in, but then also integration on how do students get rostered, how do classes get created, how does everything kind of work together. So leveraging some of the Microsoft Stack tools and all of that made it so that way it created that immersive experience of rostering, single sign-on, making sure that students were in the right groups with their teachers, and even staff were able, when they logged in, they got rights or access to whatever it is that they needed. So that was a lot of this integration that we talk about. We actually have our own F1 and F2 forms is what we call them. It's basically our forms that we send to a vendor and that they need to sign before we ever agree to use them as that. And that's what came out of this journey. We'll look at every single application. We look at every single bit of data. We're very privacy centric in our district. And so we make sure that the data that a vendor may use is not going to be used against our staff or our students in any way. And so one of the things that we did was we used Company Portal, which is the app that's basically replaced Software Center if you're used to SCCM. So it's the single hub now for all of our staff and students where they know this is where they get their software. If it's not in there, then they know it has not been approved or that it's not available to be approved. And then they can either A, work through the process to get it approved, or they know that that's not allowed. So this area is one way that basically ensured that we were containing everything, that it wasn't just anybody can install everything, but that we had a central place for them to go get software if they needed. The other thing that this enabled was that it allowed us to see how many people are actually downloading software. So we were paying tens of thousands of dollars on software that then we found out, well, gosh, only like 50 people use it, but yet we're paying for, say, 500. We are way overspending, right? So this gave us that ability to find out what is actually being used in our district and what is not. The other thing, like I mentioned before, is we do the Clever dashboard. And so that's kind of our central way for any web application. So it also did the same thing for us, as we were finding out that we were overpaying for licenses when people weren't using it. Or maybe we were underpaying and then we needed to buy more because we're getting our full use out of it. So these couple tools gave everybody a single dashboard to go to get access to everything. And it also gave them the ability to know, the district as a whole, to know, are we getting the best bang for our buck? And so what I would pose to you guys is that you're going to pay now if you do this journey, if you're looking at doing this journey, or you're going to pay later. So for us, right, we saved money on a new file storage system because we moved to OneDrive and SharePoint. We didn't need to spend more dollars on server infrastructure and server storage in order to make that happen. We actually saved money that way. We had a dramatic decrease in our user tickets because things were much more seamless. The end user experience was just working, right? So now our tickets were more in-depth technical issues that then we can figure out and leverage our partners to try to get solutions for. So instead of spending our time on trying to get updates installed, or, oh gosh, the computer dropped from the domain again, got to rejoin it. Instead of that, we were actually able to work on deeper issues that were going on and solve those. We saved a lot of money because if you're a Microsoft district in any way, right, you generally have to pay for, depending on how you're using it, in an A3 or an A5 license, and each of those levels have different things that you can use. So we were actually paying for stuff, but never utilizing it. Well, in this journey, it helped propel us to actually use all of the dollars that we were spending on Microsoft licensing to actually use everything in there for the full Microsoft stack. So that was using SDS, School Data Sync, for syncing over our Microsoft Teams classes and courses, using all of the security features that are rich in A3, and we're actually A5 security now with our licensing. So we're now using Defender, ATP, and a bunch of other technologies to try to get that more, to try to use up what we're paying for. A lot of other things that we did is we automated cloud services. So we are looking at making things either scriptable or automated in such a way. So like I said, we've looked at using Power Apps. We've looked at using PowerShell scripts that upload things into the cloud for us. So that way we're no longer just trying to do these manual things. We obviously now, with provisioning with Intune, it's saved a bunch of time on our imaging. It's much more reliable. And with our provisioning, we can actually do it anywhere that we have a district Wi-Fi connection. So no longer am I spending a lot of money on running network cables and network wires everywhere, as well as power. I only have to make sure that the device is powered on and can reach our Wi-Fi network. And now I can provision a device anywhere. So the flexibility of us being able to provision a device into Intune at any school, anywhere in our district, in any classroom, I mean, even the custodian closet, that flexibility is awesome. And that's what we did there. Hot swaps, like I mentioned, they're super easy. Again, you don't feel the pain anymore. You know, beforehand, when you got a new device, you're like, well, crap, now I got to set up my mouse cursor. Now I got to set up, my background of my cats, or my family, or my cats and family. I got to do all of these different things to make it how it used to be. Now with Intune and with Azure, it now just happens for you. So like I said, within 5 minutes, their OneDrive syncs, their background of their cat syncs, their cursor's back to the big one so that way they can see it, or the small one so that way they get the little scroller with the mouse so they can find it on the page. So they don't feel that pain anymore, and it's a much better experience there. And we also increased our security posture as part of this. We implemented technologies such as AppLocker and BitLocker. We also did things with Windows Autopilot, so that way if a device was ever lost or stolen, it was tied to our tenant. We actually had devices from hotels. I think we had one actually across the country. I can't remember what specific state it was in, but it was across the country, and they shipped it back to us because they couldn't use it. I think they might have even asked, well, can you unlock it for us? We said, no, it's ours. Why would we unlock it for you? You need to ship it to us. So we've had stuff, we've had students leave stuff everywhere, but now that's insured with these technologies to make sure that it comes back to us in some way, shape, or form. So here we are, 5 years later, right? We've gone through this journey. Every student now has an Intune managed device. Our staff have Intune devices, and now we're creating a system that serves. So now things are seamless, right? Things are working across their user profiles. Things are working across devices. It's the same experience over and over and over again. And now we've actually lowered our cost because we're not spending so much time just trying to fix all these different small problems. We're investing in using our time and energy wisely into much larger, bigger problems, systemic problems, so that way we can continue to make that experience better. So when you go through this journey, right, our staff, all they see is this. They see the iceberg, right? But what they don't see, and what you as the director, I would say, highlight with your staff as they begin this journey, is all of the things that it's going to take to make this happen. So it's going to take that persistence. It's going to fail. Something's not going to work right. But you can continue moving forward with that. And you can look at that as an opportunity to try again and to make the necessary changes to make it better. Right? The sacrifice it's going to take, which means you as the director, the sacrifice is you're going to be the tester, which means it's not going to work, and you're going to have to work with your staff to try to make it work, right? The hard work and dedication it takes to continue moving on the journey instead of looking at it as a barrier. So these are some pictures of our deployments that we've done in the past years of where students are using our Intune devices and using them for their school, as they're getting them logged in, all of that. And that's the kind of experience that we wanted to create. And this is my favorite slide, because what we did here in the Puyallup School District, and what I want to highlight with us and the team here, is that we weren't just maintaining an existing system. I think that's actually, when we talk about like maintenance, right? That's not moving anything forward. That's just keeping things as is. What we wanted to do is we wanted to push the limits. So we wanted to see what Intune could do. So 3 years ago, when we were super in depth with trying to make it work and function in our district, we kept having to push Microsoft to say, look, we need this. We need this. This is not okay. This is not working, but we need this feature, this functionality. And that was one of the things that actually helped propel us to get it, so that way it was an actual good product. And we are constantly in communication with Microsoft, in this case, around other things. I saw that on an ACPE email earlier today, as somebody was mentioning about local admin password solution tool, the LAPS tool for Azure AD devices. And one of the things that we looked at Microsoft and said is, why don't you guys have this? If you're a security-focused company, why is this not a thing? And so they're actively working on a solution for this, and I think it's going to be in beta here very soon. I'm not sure about when, but that's what they tell us. Who knows what that means? But we're actively looking forward and trying to push them to say, this is not okay. We need this. So don't be afraid to do that, and know that you're going to have to contact Microsoft support, and also know that you're going to have to contact Microsoft support and escalate things. Okay, that first tier that you might get, they might not help, and that's okay. And it's okay to have, to push forward and to say, I need somebody else. I need your engineer. I need whoever. You need to help me solve this. So those are the things that we had to do kind of on our journey and to move forward. And with that, that's kind of been our journey. Obviously, I didn't go into any technical details specifically, but I'm more than happy to. So if you have any questions around that, I am more than happy to answer them for you. Again, thank you for joining me on this thing. I really appreciate all of you at ACPE and being a part of this great community that we get to be a part of. You all are awesome, and I learn as much from you as I hope that you're learning from me. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And with that, I think we will look at answering some questions for you all. So I'm going to go over to the Q&A. All right. So I see one from Pat. Says, which groups are part of your software vetting process? Do you have information you can share on the vetting process itself? Yes, that's a good question. Do I sell my services? Oh, gosh. So Pat, right now, the application governance team that we have is mostly an IT one. So what we do is we have a process in place where our curriculum directors, they submit a ticket, but it's a very defined template that basically says, we need to know this information and you need to upload these forms into the ticket before we even begin to look at it. Working with our instructional leadership department, what that has done then is it brought them awareness of why we ask these questions, why is it important to ask vendors these questions, especially when it comes around student data privacy, integration with existing systems, right? And then going back to that seamless experience. So that's where working with them was very important. Once they submit that ticket, then we at the IT department review the F1, F2 forms, like what we call them, which is our integration and privacy FERPA forms. And once they answer that and we work through that, then we have a conversation with the curriculum director about, what our concerns are. We talk with the vendor to get any clarifying questions answered, stuff like that. So those are a lot of the things that we did. But the one that I run, or that we run here in our IT center, is mostly IT, but we work hand in hand with our instructional leadership department. Garen, do I sell my services? Yeah, that's maybe a conversation for another time, but I'm more than happy to help, definitely. Let's see. I might butcher this, so Stephen or Stefan, not sure there. When will the step-by-step come out? The step-by-step of what? You might need to clarify there, of how to move to Intune, if that's what you're thinking of. The biggest thing I would say, if that is the question, oh yes, okay. So on how to move to Intune, the biggest thing that we did was we talked with Microsoft and we asked them to help us. I know that Microsoft has a bunch of ways to do that now. So things like Fast Track, I know, was one of them in the past. I don't know if that's still a thing. And we went to our Microsoft rep, and that's kind of how the conversation started. So you might want to consider looking at that. As far as anything else from there, you have to really start off with thinking very simple-minded and saying, okay, am I already replicating my Active Directory data up to Azure AD using Azure AD Connect? If you're not doing that, then that's step one. If those two aren't connected, then that's where you need to begin. After you do that and you get that stuff up there, then the next thing you need to do is you have kind of figure out how you want to begin. So for example, there's obviously a lot around autopilot right now. We are not choosing that here in this district at this time. We create what's called provisioning packages using Windows Configuration Designer. Windows Configuration Designer is a Microsoft Store app that you can download on any Windows device. And basically what it does is it gives the very basics of how you can kind of set up an operating system. Inside of there, we set very minimal settings. It's basically connect to Azure AD and join Azure AD, and then connect to our district Wi-Fi. So we have an onboarding Wi-Fi that we use here in our district that then allows for that. From there, it basically Intune does the rest. All we want it to do is just to get in there. After that, we set all of our settings, policies, configurations, updates, all of that, all up in Intune. And that's kind of how we began. It was basically that. Like I said, how do I get a device up there? Because then from there, I can then start working inside of Intune to then configure the rest. So then, we talked about updates, configurations, and lockdowns, right? Drivers, software, all of that stuff. Let's see. Another question I have is curious on how feature updates have worked for you. Any challenges with device drivers? Oh, that's a great question, Greg, because we were just talking about this in our user experience meeting earlier today. So feature updates beforehand were very painful with SCCM. I don't know what it's like in other districts, maybe who have maybe a better SCCM environment than we did at the time, but it was very painful and hard. And again, it was working maybe 40% of the time, 60% of the time, right? With Intune, it's a much, much, much better experience. The only thing that we have to do is basically communicate to our staff and students, hey, guess what? You're going to receive an update. It's going to take longer. Right now, it takes no less than 5 minutes for the general Windows updates, right? The security or critical updates that they send out. But with feature updates, right? The 2004 one, the 20H2, those are about, anywhere from like 20 minutes to 40 minutes, right? So we tell our staff, hey, you're going to have a long reboot. So just know that, plan for it, do it overnight. And again, we give them the opportunity to pick a time to say, do you want to do it now? So maybe they're on their lunchtime or, they don't have anything next period. So then they can do it now, or they can do it later that night. So that flexibility allows us to push out feature updates that take time while allowing them to pick and determine when they want to do it. Challenges with device drivers, mostly no. So what we do is when we provision a device, we pre-prep them. So we do all the work on the back end here. We hire high school and college kids to prep all of our devices during the late spring to summertime for the next fall. And what they do is when they provision a device, we have a way of basically checking to make sure that it's fully patched, all the device drivers are installed and updated, and all the software is downloaded and installed and ready to go. So that way when we hand it to a staff or when we hand it to a student, all they literally have to do is log in. We wait about 5 minutes for everything to sync, and then we say, see you later. And then in COVID world, it was even more difficult than that. So we actually had drive-through device pickups or drop-offs. So a parent or a family would drive through with their student. We'd literally, through the window of the car, we had outside Wi-Fi that would reach. So they'd turn on the device, they would log in. And as soon as they logged in, we were able to trust the process so much that we didn't have them wait 5 minutes in the car. We just said, are you fully logged in and you see the desktop? Yep. Okay. Go home and connect to your home Wi-Fi and see you later. And they drove off. And we didn't have very many issues when that happened even then. So device drivers, the challenges with that, we checked the box inside of the back end of Intune that said push out Microsoft certified device drivers, the ones that are approved through their Microsoft updates that they have. And since we've done that, and we also pre-prep the devices with drivers, we don't have very many issues when it comes to that. We did have one, but it's because Microsoft has changed the way that they handle drivers, and we have some older devices that are experiencing this, but we can easily, upload it as a software piece, make it required on all of those devices, and then push it out. So it makes it very easy. Let's see, I might might mention this name bad, so I apologize in advance. I'm going to say it's Kiyo or Kayo Toma from Bainbridge Island. So your fonts example made me wonder how much, I'm not sure what that word is, did you allow staff to carry over? So how much stuff did you allow your staff to carry over, and would you make the same decision today? That's a good question. I think because we already had made the move to OneDrive for our staff, they could carry over whatever was in their local file storage. So all they did is just basically do a copy paste, and that we were fine with that. What we didn't allow to come over, junk files, thank you, and apps and etc. Thank you for that clarification. So what we did not allow was give them the ability to install their own software. So again, we forced them, and I don't even want to say force, but because we wanted to change the way we were doing things, we wanted to make sure that they went to one location to get all their stuff, and that's where Company Portal came into play. So they know that any district-approved software, that's where they can go and get it. And that's what made it better for that. And that's also what made us more secure in the process, right? So then you're not just having all of these random things just running on your computers, right? You have somewhat of a control, but still making it easy for them to go get it. So Devin, are you using Intune on Mac OS? That is, so we are, again, a Microsoft district. We only have, I think we have about 170 iPads for CTE purposes, for things like drones and specialized software. And then our assistive technology department has some specialized apps that work with students. So, but otherwise we're about 30-ish thousand Windows devices and about 170 iPads. What we found out is that whenever we need to troubleshoot an iPad, we needed a Mac computer in order to get logs. Apparently, this is a thing. And so when we actually contacted Microsoft support for Mac OS, or for iPad stuff, sorry, they said, well, hey, we need you to plug it into a Mac and download these logs and do it this way. And we went, well, shoot, we don't have a Mac. So we only have 2 Mac devices, and it's specifically for our IT department to be able to troubleshoot any iPad issues if needed. So that's it. However, I do know that Intune can work on Macs, and that they're constantly releasing more and more features around that. So if you do have Macs in your district, you can have them be Intune managed, and there's more and more features coming out. I think we actually have both of our Macs in there. We just don't set much because it's only for our IT folks at this time. And Devin again, so how do you handle reimaging? Is that something that can only happen on site? So yes, with our provisioning package, how we handle it is they plug in a flash drive which has certain files on it, and then they basically boot to it. And what that does is that puts on a clean OS and then joins it to Azure AD and Intune. After that happens, then Intune takes over the rest and basically says, oh, you're a student device. I need to apply all these profiles. I need to apply all of these settings. I need to download all of this software, and it begins that whole process. The whole process for us, it's about, I think we'll want to say about anywhere from like 10 to 15 minutes for it to be cleanly installed Windows OS and also to be joined to Intune. And then from there, it always depends on the volume that we're provisioning, because sometimes it can take up to 2 hours because we're like provisioning 300 to 400 devices at a time, right? And the network is just trying to download all of the software and settings at a time. But then other times it's very quick. It's less than 30 minutes, less than 45 minutes, depending on what's happening on the network at the time. So that's how we handle kind of that. And we actually have what we call technology library paras. So they are librarian paras who have since been taken under our fold, and they work in all of our schools. And they're kind of the frontline support for our students when they're on site. They know how to provision with Intune. So most of the provisioning now is actually done by either our summer helpers, our technology assistants, or our TLPs out in the schools. And they're the ones that know how to do this. And that's how simple the process is, that they can even do it. They don't even need, quote unquote, IT staff, technicians, or anybody to do the work. we wanted to make sure that it was so simple and easy that they could do it. So that way it was giving them the ability to surface people more efficiently and effectively than having to always come to us to try to do it. Plus, we couldn't handle that volume. So let's see, Ashley Stanton, what are the biggest issues you've run into with Intune? That is a good question. I think some of our biggest issues, I want to say, was mostly around just beginning and figuring out all of the different software loads that we had. So trying to figure out how do we get all of the software roped in and then uploaded and into a company portal, because as we were deploying out devices, right, we were hearing back from, well, hey, I need, and then we had to quickly get the software, figure out who had it sometimes, get it packaged, and then upload it into Intune and then available, so then that way people could use it. So that was one big issue, was just the massive amount of software that was coming back to us and that we had to prep it. And sometimes, right, it was, well, I have this CD that I've used for, the past 15 years. And then we go, well, is there like a newer version? So then we had to do research. Sometimes we had to purchase, new software. I don't think we ever got any floppies, but that would have been awesome if we did. But definitely CDs. I remember CDs coming back to us. So that was one of the biggest issues. And that was more because it placed a tremendous burden on our IT staff to try to get all that software prepped and ready and turned around quickly. The other issue that I would see is that we had was how we first started out trying to get everything prepped before we handed it to a student, right? So making sure that all the software is on there. And what we did at the time was we had a student who kind of created a PowerShell script that now became this massive thing that basically checked everything and said, okay, is the device fully updated? Yes. Is the device drivers fully up? Yes. Does it have all of these things? Yes, 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 yes. So once that happened, then we knew the device was complete. Basically, our own kind of white glove service was done, and then we could shut it down and put it on the pile ready for delivery out to our schools. So that process, really honing that in and trying to figure that out and then have a systematic way of making that possible, that was another challenge that we faced. So I think those are some of the biggest issues that I can think of off the top of my head. Sean, let's see, Sean Ruiz Johnson, do you see going to autopilot in the future? That is a good question. We're actually kind of bouncing that idea around right now. The biggest thing for us is the flexibility and the ease of use that we have with our provisioning package right now. It's going to be hard to transition off of that. We've obviously talked with Microsoft about autopilot and its functionality, but for our district, the ease at which we can provision devices, get them prepped, and get them ready for whatever the need is, and we've created it to be so efficient right now, is that we would need autopilot to mimic and do the same thing in order for us to transition and move to it. Anytime, and just so you guys kind of know, this not a bash on Microsoft, but just something I've learned over the years. Anytime Microsoft is pushing something very hard, so like with Intune, they are pushing autopilot very hard. That doesn't necessarily mean that you want to jump on that ship, right? That might mean that they're just trying to figure out why people aren't moving to it, so quickly or whatever. So don't be afraid to push back or to kind of say, you know what, I want to see more of this than others. So, but that's kind of how we're looking at it a little bit, is just because they're touting it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way that you want to go. So let's see, Devin Hunter, what does the licensing structure look like for Intune? Is there a per device cost? It depends on your Microsoft licensing. So it depends on what level, like what you're already choosing in there. So if you're on the Microsoft 365 with the A3 licensing, for example, then Intune management and all of that is already included in that licensing. So there's no additional dollars needed if that's what you're asking. If you're not on that and say you're on the A1, then I believe that there is something else that you have to purchase, some sort of add-on, and I don't remember what they call it because it's like Microsoft with licensing, they change it every 6 months anyway. So what I tell you today, 6 months from now, it's going to change. But that's what you would have to look into, and that's where I would leverage your Microsoft account rep for. Microsoft licensing is its own degree, in case you don't know, and I feel like I'm about at a bachelor's degree now over the years of just learning how to put it all together and what it means. So let's see. Oh, and Devin again. So SCCM Gateway has a cost to send bits to systems off campus. Is Intune the same? No, the cost, there is no cost to that. As long as the device is connected to the internet and it can talk to Intune, that's it. That's all you have to do. So the beauty of Intune is it's fully cloud managed devices, fully cloud technology, meaning as long as they can connect to the device wherever it's at in the world, then you're good to go, and there's no cost there. So we don't use the SCCM gateway. We have no tie to our on-prem with our devices in any way that way. And because of that, when COVID hit us, the last thing we had to think about was how do we manage all of these devices now that they're out in all of these different houses and places. It was so seamless that what we had to worry about was how do we teach kids in a remote learning environment. That's where we had to place our focus. So I know that some school districts were like, well, crap, how do we now update devices and do all that? We didn't have to think about that because we had already done that work ahead of time. And that's just a tribute to the team and the work that we had done over the years to get us to that point. And so, no, we don't have any additional costs. We're already paying for it with our licensing, and every device, it connects back, it gets any changes we make, any software we want, and it's already there to go. Let's see, Eric Veach, what is your experience with large deployments via Intune, such as the Adobe Suite? Does this all pull from the cloud, or is there a local cache option? That's a good question. I'm not sure if there is a local cache option. However, we do not use any local cache option. We download Inventor, which I think is like 17 gigs, if I remember right. We use all the Adobe Creative Cloud suite, so we do things such as Photoshop, Premiere Pro. We do a bunch of, like Revit is another one that we do, AutoCAD, a lot of these large gigs, multi-gig installations, and we use it all through Intune. So the only downside is that it takes a while, depending on the speed of your internet connection. It can take a long while, but we put it all up into company portal. So when somebody goes up there and clicks install, and if they let the device sit long enough, it will install, and it'll download everything, it'll unpackage it, and it'll install it on their device, and then they get to use it. So it removed that as a burden. Or having to worry about, well, how do people get all these, or do they need to be on site? If they have a pretty good internet connection at home, and as long as it's not like a cellular one that has up to a certain limit, they can just let it sit and let it do its thing. Now, the other thing that we're looking at, and I won't be able to talk in depth about this, but we're actually investing into the Windows Virtual Desktop environment mostly for our CTE courses. So Windows Virtual Desktop is basically kind of a virtualized desktop in the cloud in Azure. And what that does is it allows us to package applications such as AutoCAD, Inventor, Photoshop, Premiere Pro, and then they can access that, and it runs in the cloud, and all the student needs on their one-to-one device now is just a internet connection, and all the workloads happening up in Azure. So now you've eliminated the barrier of anytime, anywhere learning. That student, instead of having to wait for that teacher to ask them, hey, can you stay after, so then that way I can work on my project or assignment, right? They can go home in the comfort of their own house or wherever they are, and they can do their work. They can go to the the app, or you can go even to the web version and say, okay, I'm going to load up my AutoCAD application, and it loads, and then voila, now you can run AutoCAD on a lower end device that doesn't have the hardware in order to do that. So you're saving money, you're also increasing that anywhere, anytime learning, and now that whole end user experience, right? Students don't have to wait for an assignment to have to do something. They can do something for their own pleasure, for their own personal reason. They don't have to wait. So now you've expanded the creativity of what can happen. So, oh, Garen, Shannon again. No Chromebooks? Absolutely not. The biggest thing for us is privacy, privacy when it comes to Google. But no, we are not a Google district at all. Although I will have you know, before we started on this journey, we did evaluate whether at that point in time we said, okay, we're a Windows district. That doesn't necessarily mean that's where we need to be. So we actually did a license comparison and a cost of change comparison between being either continuing as a Microsoft district, moving to a Google district, or even moving over to an Apple district. And I know that's, maybe fewer there, but we looked at all of that and we did a cost by cost comparison. And for us over the long term, it was actually a better decision to stick and stay with being a Microsoft and a Windows district. And also for some of the other things too that I didn't get a touch on. So things like the accessibility features inside of Windows, things like the digital inking that is very important to our district. Our students write on their computer screens with the digital ink. And the new devices that are coming out now that we purchase, they actually can write on their screen using the number 2 graphite pencil. So they can actually write digital ink on their screen using just a pencil touch. And they don't need the actual stylus anymore. So those are some of the things now, because we choose to use that, and that's our instructional vision, that's what we do. And no, Garen, I do not want any of your floppies. You can keep them. Let's see, Brett, what software did you use to repackage legacy applications? So Microsoft has a Win32 application that repackages it as a whole. They have a whole thing on their Microsoft Docs website that kind of walks you through step by step of not only where to download the application, but then also how to use it. And we use that basically for anything that doesn't natively work or is a large application. We even use it for things like registry edits that are not native inside of Intune. So we package like a PowerShell script with a registry edit inside of it. And what the Win32 thing up in Intune does is it allows you to set like making sure that you, crap, I'm going to mess up the name now, but basically it makes sure that the setting that you tried to set actually worked. So then if like say your app failed, you would know, okay, the registry setting didn't get set properly or something isn't working right. So that actually kind of gives you some level of reporting to let you know whether it worked or it didn't work. So if we needed to push out a registry change of some kind and we wanted to make sure that it worked, then that was another way of trying to figure out, oh, that is how we could do that. Let's see, so Stefan or Steven, sorry about that, if whichever one it is the cloud storage expensive? No, it is not that expensive. And Intune doesn't charge you for their cloud storage. So whatever you load up in there, as far as like apps go, you're not being charged for it. So like I said, we load up multi-gig applications into as a Win32 app inside of Intune, and they don't charge us for it because they're already charging us with our licensing costs. So you're not having to pay twice, which is nice. Now, if you use something like Azure Blob Storage to store certain things, then yes, you will be charged for those storage costs. And for us, it's very minimal. We don't use a whole lot for that reason. It's usually like maybe simple files that we need a place to kind of download before we use it. We use Azure Blob Storage for that, but most of what we do is all packaged apps inside of that Win32 application and then upload into Intune from there. And then Brett, what's the name of the deployment tool you're using instead of autopilot? They're pushing autopilot on us now. Yes, and they will continue to do that. They're still doing that to us, by the way. They're pushing autopilot on us as well. So the name is Windows Configuration Designer is the application. And that basically creates what's called a provisioning package. A provisioning package is just basically a file with a bunch of settings that you plug into the flash drive of the USB. And when you reach the out-of-box experience, when you first turn on a device or the UBI screen, you basically, I think now you have to hit the Windows key 5 times at that screen when it's asking you like, what language do you want to work in? Then it says, do you want to install a provisioning package? You select yes. You click your provisioning package that you have. We only have 2, a staff one and a student one. And then it basically applies it. And then the device is already in Intune at that point. And then Intune takes over and takes care of the rest. So that's the other method that we do. Now, I've heard both sides when it comes to autopilot. Some districts I know say they love it and they use it. We've even heard of some districts who drop ship the computer straight to the student's home or to the staff's home, and then autopilot works in that case, which is great. And then I've heard other districts who they don't at all, and we're one of those that chooses not to right now. So it all depends on your use case. It all depends on how you want it all to work. But really look through kind of the experience that you want not only your folks, your IT folks to have, but then also what you want the overall experience to be for your staff and students as well. So, and then make that decision based off of what you need there. So, thank you all. That's all the things that I see very good. I really appreciate all of your questions, and I really hope that this was helpful. And again, I can go technical as much as you want, so really appreciate you, and hope you guys enjoy ACPE as much as I am, even though it's virtually. Can't wait to see you guys in person again, hopefully as soon as possible. So thank you very much.